Should you send a quarterly email or send it when the news is available? And we're going to actually, I have some slides on that, but my short answer, and I'll show you something, is that if there's news available, yeah, email is immediate, and you want to get that news out. With some of these other pieces, these two examples I showed you, one particularly for Covenant House, this has been like a cultivation tool. So pretty much it's not about the particular news in there. The lead story is actually a story telling the donors what their support made happen. So we usually try to bring it back to a child's story. Each organization, of course, would be different. So if you're giving important information, or if it's medical or health information, you do want to have that go out more frequently. And as I mentioned, each organization has a different frequency. So it sounds like you probably might be able to sustain more than a monthly or maybe a weekly, and it varies between each group. And the way to do it is really monitor open rates and click rates. And those are, if any, just for everyone, just quickly, the open rates are the people who open the email. We're able to track that with a little image within each email. And then the click rates are when someone clicks on a link within the email, there's a tracking code that goes back to the software that you're using. So just continuing and thinking about that, this is an example for PetSmart Charities, which is a little bit more aggressive on the cultivation, but also on the fundraising. Animal groups really can be a little bit more aggressive and tell a really sad story about a pet that they're helping. And this has been both a very effective cultivation and fundraising piece. This newsletter actually raised a ton of money in between actual appeals. We do some cultivation in it, but we also make sure we tell a really compelling story. And from those stories, pulling on the heartstrings really does get people to donate. And then lastly, and going back to news or being timely, this is a piece for the Northeast Animal Shelter. Cupcake needed a rare heart surgery, and they needed to raise the funds for it. So we were able to put this email together with them, and we raised the money within 24 hours for the surgery. So it's one of those things where getting it out right away and being there is really important.
Timing is everything, or just about everything. And if you have worked in direct mail, you certainly know the importance of timing. That your holiday direct mail piece for almost everybody is by far the most important single solicitation of the year. And that appeal you get out to your donors, right after Thanksgiving, the very beginning of December, it pulls in the lion's share, or is your most successful appeal of the year. You probably find other times of the year work well, often early fall, January, sometimes the spring, depending on the kind of work your organization does. And timing is also very important online. It's critical online as well. It's critical in an email program, but it actually works differently. First of all, there is a skew toward year end, and it's actually a more dramatic skew than you have offline, but it's later. It's not. I mean, the period right after Thanksgiving is usually a strong one, but it's for almost everybody, it's the final days of the year, and actually in many cases the final hours of the year and minutes of the year that are by far the most important, that can bring in a very high proportion of the money for that you raise in the entire year. So particular times, very important. I mean, depending on what the organization does, spring can be good. You can have certain success around certain holidays. If your summer programs, the mid-spring can be very successful. But that year-end skew for almost everyone is tremendous. And the other significant difference are the opportunities afforded by the speed and precision of the medium. That if there is a crisis, if there's something in the headlines, if something's happened that you'd like to react to, chances are you can't do it cost effectively offline, but you can almost certainly do it via email. So Paul's going to take you through some examples of how we can leverage timing.
I think sometimes timing online is even more important than direct mail, because you really need to be ready to move and react. I'll show you some examples, recent examples actually. Here's an example that we sent out for Freedom from Hunger. They actually got this email out hours after the news of Haiti, and they ended up raising just thousands and thousands of dollars in hours. And they actually got out before some of the major international development organizations, and they actually had donors call them and say to them, "Thank you for your email. You got to me before CARE and other organizations," and they got a wonderful response to this. They were sending money directly to Haiti, to a partner that they worked with down there, and they were sending 100% of their donation. So being there and being able to get that out the same day that the earthquake happened really lifted the response. This is another one back a couple of years ago with Hurricane Katrina. PetSmart Charities was able to get something out, and they were able to raise $100,000 in a week for this particular appeal. One thing we're noticing actually is that the lifespan of a urgent appeal is now teetering around. You'll receive about most of the donations between 3 and 5 days now. There was just something released a couple of weeks ago about that. So the timing is so important. If you miss that opportunity in that short amount of time, our policy with most of the organizations we're working with is to make sure you have a disaster plan if you're dealing with anything that you could have an urgent news break. So have that ready, have a template email ready to go, have template copy so that you really can be there when the news drops. We know that so many things online really depend on the news of when people are making their searches, or and having it reinforced with an email going out at the same time. Also, other times are holidays. You can really dovetail your message with certain holidays. This is an example for an animal organization where we created an appeal around Valentine's Day because their monthly giving program is called the Pledge of Love. And we were able to actually send this out after year end, and it received a really good response rate for an online monthly giving program because we were able to kind of lighten it a little bit more with Valentine's Day and coming at them, and certainly having a monthly donor versus a single gift is advantageous for any organization. Monthly giving is a really great way to have steady income in these tough times. And so a lot of the groups we're working with really have survived because of these monthly giving programs online. And as we all know, they're really cost effective. There's very little maintenance to them. The only time you really need to go back to the donor is when their credit card expires. Another example, as Harry mentioned, is holidays. And I think that one thing to be aware of online is there's 2 different times of the year where people give. We'll find the people who give right after November, and they're not the procrastinators. They're usually giving to that really holiday human interest or some kind of story message, versus the people who wait until the last minute and who want that tax deduction, and they make a year-end gift. And usually that comes in around December 31st or the 30th. We've been testing, and now we've rolled out completely for most of the groups that we're working on this postcard format, which we find really effective versus what I showed you here, the appeal format, which is more like a letter and a direct mail. Well, this one, at the end of a campaign, or at a really, when you're really timing something to end, has been more effective than the appeal, and we tested that. And this actually worked out really short and sweet, strong donate now, and then really kind of making the message forward that you really need to make that gift before midnight of 2008.
Well, I'm going to ask a question, even though I said to hold questions. I think I'm allowed to do it. But I know many groups did have very successful holiday appeals, the late November, early December. Did any do better this past year than they did at year end?
Only one organization that we worked with had one holiday appeal do better than the year end, but majority is we're seeing between November and December about 70% of the income coming in for a lot of groups, but about 65% is coming in the last couple of days of the year, and it's really incredible. So making sure that you have these pieces. With some organizations, I'll show you a technique in a few, but we're doing a 1-2 punch with the resend, which I have an example of a different one, but which really kind of getting that message home to make sure that you catch those people who are making that gift. Just another example too, taking advantage of World Days where there's already media coverage. So we launched this campaign for Freedom from Hunger 4 or 5 years ago when the Bush administration made malaria a big priority. It used to be Africa Malaria Day, and then they changed it to World Malaria Day. And what happens is during that time, there's a lot of news coverage. And so we're sending out email appeals at the same time while people are searching on that. And this has been a really effective campaign for Freedom from Hunger, capitalizing on the news already about the event that's going on around the country and the world.
Adage number 3, ask or ye shall not receive. Now, all of us in the room are fundraisers. We know the critical importance of the ask, and in direct mail, as in every other fundraising medium, having a very clear and strong ask is important, and it needs to be right up front. It needs to be clear. In your direct mail appeals, you can't leave any doubt why you're writing, if you want to raise money, why you're writing to that individual. It couldn't be more different online and in your email program. It can't just be about fundraising. And again, this is one of the most profound differences, one of the pitfalls that so many groups fall into. They think it can be the same, but it has to start with connecting, with engaging, and with building a relationship, and continuing the cultivation and building up to the point of the first ask. And again, this is an area where so many groups get tripped up by being very aggressive right out the starting gate.
One thing to note is I'm seeing more and more organizations, and usually not coming from development, but I think I've been finding executive directors and presidents getting involved more and saying, let's send out another email because it's so cost effective and it's so easy. And at the detriment of the email file, though, we're seeing is that you really can't just keep on sending one appeal after another. What we always see with most appeals is that you have your first response and then you send it again and the response really does decline, sometimes by 50% or more. And so you want to be careful about how many times a year when you're going to do those multi-series emails, especially what I recommend is year-end is the time when you were going to do something like that. But other times of the year, you can try different things. This is an example we did for Covenant House, and as part of their Do One Thing campaign, this went out in early February, and what we wanted to do was, it was right off of year-end fundraising, so we really didn't want to have the most aggressive campaign right away. We wanted to give it a little bit more time, so we gave them 4 choices. One was drop an item off at a Covenant House location. One was make a donation to their matching gift campaign. Third one was invite a friend to become a Facebook member of their group. And then the last was on February 14th, stop by a Covenant House location. And there was events going on various locations. But diversifying those asks is important sometimes, especially after a very aggressive fundraising campaign. But when you're going to be aggressive, and here's an example of a holiday appeal, just making sure you have multiple asks within a piece. Most people do view emails differently. Sometimes they'll respond to the top, the bottom, and also a text link. And there's different ways of looking at that. Everyone scans emails sometimes, and some people read the entire message and wait all the way to the last link to click on it. But you really do need to have those multiple asks within a piece and where the eye goes. And I'm going to show you an example of a test in a couple of minutes about a Donate Now button on an email. Sometimes you got to be direct and really kind of make sure that ask is right front and center. As you see, this is the top of this email. It's announcing a new campaign to save play for Kaboom. And certainly that ask needs to be reinforced. And this is onto the landing page. And then you see the continuity with the ask and the design and making sure that when someone goes from your email, if you're being aggressive with fundraising and if it's a particular campaign, making sure that a landing page does have some kind of ask to make sure that you can actually drive the message home.